Real quick, I want to tell you about a free webinar I'm hosting on April 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time called Repurposing Content for Your Podcast. Depending on the guru of the day, you need a podcast, you need to be on TikTok, you need to be posting on LinkedIn, and don't forget your own blog and newsletter. And this can lead to burnout fast. But I'm here to tell you a better way. By repurposing content, there's a reason I'm able to publish 3 podcast episodes per week, 3 newsletters, and post on LinkedIn almost daily. So in this free 60-minute webinar, you will learn how to capture content ideas as easily as possible, how to build your own content flywheel from content you've already created, how to keep track of everything, and how to create a two-way street where you're repurposing for and from your podcast. Sign up for free today at profitablepodcaster.fm/repurpose. If you are struggling to create content, you need this webinar. Again, that URL is profitablepodcaster.fm/repurpose. One of the most common questions I get when I tell people that they should do more podcast swaps is, where should I go to find podcasts to swap with? And yes, you can just look on Apple Podcasts or reach out to the podcasts that you listen to, but that might not be the best strategy because you want to find similar audiences, lookalike audiences, places where you know the listener will want to listen to your podcast. A while back, I told a story about how Friends did a 2-episode crossover extravaganza with Mad About You and ER. Mad About You led into Friends on the same night, and Friends led into ER also on the same night, which means that NBC was pretty confident with those lookalike audiences. So they knew that the crossover episode would get more people from Mad About You watching Friends, and they knew that they could maybe pull in some of the ER audience because they were going to be sitting in front of the TV anyway. Maybe they wanted something more lighthearted before they got into a medical drama. So today, I'm going to tell you 5 places you can look to find good podcasts to swap with. Having a profitable podcast is like having any other profitable business. You need to make money, sure, but you also need to grow. You need to spend your time wisely, and you need predictability. A couple of sponsors won't make you a profitable podcaster, but having systems to stay consistent, create steady growth, and generate predictable income will. That's what you'll get with this show. Hi, I'm your host, Joe Casabona, and my podcasts have been profitable from day one. I'll share everything I know with you here on The Profitable Podcaster. Okay, number 1, and my favorite source because they make it so easy, is the Tink Media Podcast Swap database or podcast promo swap list. This is an Airtable base that you can access that has all sorts of information. And so it has the name of the show and description. It has a link to the podcast as well as average downloads per episode, which is good. You probably want to find something equitable as far as downloads go, or at least you want to find people that you can help as much as they can help you. It also has the opportunity interest. So are they open to promo or ad swaps? Are they open to social media swaps, crossover episodes, things like that? And then there's the contact name and email. So again, these are people who have opted in to want to share and do podcast swaps with. So it's not a cold email or cold outreach. It's more like a lukewarm outreach. I found 20 podcasts to work with back in September that helped me grow my audience, double my audience. I found 20 podcasts to work with through this database, and I'm going to look through it again and do more outreach because now I want to do it for this podcast. Last time I did it for How I Built It. So that's number 1, Tink Media's podcast swap database. All of these Links will be in the show notes, which you can find over at profitablepodcaster.fm/302 for season 3, episode 2. Number 2 is Apple Podcasts. And here's what I recommend you do here. Go to your podcast page and look under the You Might Also Like section. These are people Apple knows are listening to your podcast as well as other podcasts. Now, this might not always work. If I go to the Profitable Podcaster and look at You Might Also Like, there's Pat Flynn and Ask Pat 2.0, which I've been on. So, I mean, that one worked, I guess. But there's also Alex Hormozy's show, and these are huge shows. They probably aren't open to podcast swaps, but it doesn't help to look there to at least get ideas. If that doesn't work, then you can do two things. Look at new podcasts in your category, or look at podcasts in the You Might Also Like category, right? So maybe your category is education, but people are listening to a lot of business podcasts. Reach out to those folks or podcasts in that category to see if that works. You can also do that category search on other directories. We'll talk about that in a minute, but you could also do that on, say, Spotify. Spotify doesn't have the You Might Also Like section, but they do have different lists. Like their categories and the way that's generated is a little different. So it might be worth looking there as well. Number 3, Arielle Nissenblatt. She's an amazing person to follow on social media. If you are a podcaster, I strongly recommend following her. But she set up a podcast community Discord. And so, again, much like the Tink Media database, this is a community of podcasters who have opted in to networking and being together. And so there's lots of stuff in this Discord. To be honest, Discord kind of scares and confuses me, and I'm not as active as I should be, but that's going to change in 2023. So there is a self-promo area. So you can post. I wouldn't post like every episode you do, but I would post relevant episodes or episodes that you're proud of. So that's kind of a bonus way to grow your show, is to tell other people, other podcasters about it. But there's also a swaps and collabs area. So what you can do is look through the recent posts or posts that you're looking to do a collab, and then people will reach out. So again, I would include the name of your show. Maybe don't do how many downloads you get at first, or maybe you can. It all depends. If the podcaster is really concerned, they'll ask. But you can also do category, listenership, and people you target, and then who you're looking to swap with and what kind of swaps you're doing. So that could be a podcast swap. It could be a feed drop, right, which is where you each drop an episode, or it could be a crossover episode. So that is the Discord, the podcast community Discord. That is an open community, so you should be able to join, agree to the rules that you won't be a jerk, and then start participating and networking with other podcasters. Number 4 is Podchaser, podchaser.com. If you go to your podcast there, first of all, your podcast should be there. So if it's not, submit your podcast to Podchaser. And if you go there, there will be a similar tab. So if I'm looking at the Profitable Podcaster page, there is a similar tab. This is similar to the You Might Also Like section in Apple Podcasts, but it's a lot more robust. There are a lot more podcasts. Some are small, some are big. And again, this is what they've determined are lookalike audiences or people who are also listening. So this is this section could be, if it's not as defined, this section might be a little you might have to wade through a lot of stuff to figure out if that works, especially if your show is new. So with the Profitable Podcaster, there's a lot of stuff here that I don't think would be relevant, but it's at least good for idea generation. If I look at how I built it, there are a lot more relevant shows. So there's a lot of podcast shows, right? Or a lot of WordPress podcasts, which makes sense because for a long time it was WordPress focused. But then there's also like Founder Quests. There's some tech stuff, and so that's a little bit more like once they have more data on your show, they'll learn a little bit more about it. But this is a good place to at least get started and start generating ideas, right? And so again, you can kind of look at those and then find what I would say are lookalike shows based on that. And then finally, number 5, Listen Notes. Now, Listen Notes catches some flack for the way that they calculate like the popularity, I guess. I'm not sure. But if you go to your show under at listennotes.com, there's a community tab, and on the community tab, it has a couple of things. It has in Listen Later. So these are people who have added your podcast to their Listen Later queue. And what you could do is click through to that queue and that list and then see what other podcasts are listed there. So for example, for How I Built It, there's How I Grew This, there's The Revenue Engine, there's Amy Porterfield's podcast, and there's a bunch of others. And then you have at least relative size data to yours, right? So you have like the Listen Notes score, and then you have the top percentage. So according to Listen Notes, my podcast is in the top 1.5%. And so I could look at other podcasts around there. Now, if you're not listed in there, there's also curated lists. So your podcast could be listed there. And then again, look at those shows and see if you can reach out. But Listen Notes also has their own Explorer and curated lists. So you could always look at their curated lists and see like most inspiring podcasts, best investing podcasts, and look at those shows to see if maybe there are lookalike audiences there. And there's again if it's not true data for like the stats and the size and the number of downloads, it's at least relative data. So you could see how does this show, according to Listen Notes, compare to yours. So there you have it. There are 5 ways to find podcasts with podcast swaps. We have Tink Media's podcast swap list, Apple Podcasts, Ariel Nissenblatt's podcast community Discord, Podchaser, and Listen Notes. So let me know. Write in joe@casabona.org or jcasabona on most social networks. Which one are you going to try first? I'm really curious. Let me know. For all of the show notes, for links to everything we talked about, you can head over to profitablepodcaster.fm/302. Don't forget to join the mailing list because I send out great tips multiple times a week. You'll also get notified when I'm doing live events like webinars. And until next time, I can't wait to see what you make.